Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Start Fishing. Just a reminder, this is a 360 degree video, so you should be able to see in all directions. Just use your mouse or your device, turn it, click, drag, whatever it takes, and you can look wherever you want. Well, if you watched my last video, you know that after pulling my boat out of the water in Alabama, I noticed a significant crack on one side of the boat. And the next day there was actually still water seeping out of it, so I knew that I had actually breached all the way through, and I was taking on water. Not something you want to have happen with a Carolina skiff, because the older models have styrofoam that actually soaks up the water and can make your boat just set really low in the water and make it really heavy. So I've been doing all my fishing in my kayak while I'm waiting for the materials to ship so that I can patch the hole. Most of my recent trips have been to the canal there in Augusta, just looking for yellow perch, but today I decided to come out to the dam with the intentions of looking for white perch, crappie, or whatever might have congregated below the dam. And we've finally had some cold weather here recently, and for several days in a row it's been nice and cold, and the colder it gets, the more likely there are certain species of fish that might start to school up in some of those deep holes and just kind of stay there. Now, when I arrived, I immediately noticed some surface activity, and if you look over to the South Carolina bank, you should be able to see that the seagulls are still working quite heavily. This made me think that the hybrid or striper bite might be kind of hot. So the problem was I only brought my light rods because I thought I was going to be fishing for panfish, but the allure was just too great. So I dug through my tackle box and I found a jig and tied it on and decided to paddle over to the rope. Now, the other thing that inspired me to go ahead and make that paddle was the Corps of Engineers were currently generating on 2, 3, 4, and 5. And this is like the perfect setup if you're fishing out of a small boat, just to come over and fish off the rope. The current's not too strong. In fact, in some areas it lightly brings you into the rope. So, there's not big waves, it's not crazy. It's just easy to stay in one place and make casts over there to the current. So this was weird. I don't know if you noticed, but I had made a cast and the kayak had floated away from the rope. So I was kind of fiddling with it, and my jig was just kind of floating and I wasn't reeling. But then as I began to reel, there was pressure there, but it didn't really feel like a fish. And that was the point where I realized that I actually had a fish on. I thought maybe I'd caught some weeds or something, or even that I was on the bottom. I was just trying to reel up some slack until I felt that it had hit a rock.
Oh, look at that.
I definitely wasn't expecting a bass. Not a bad start. I'm not sure if that was a largemouth or a river bass. Couldn't really tell. But it was definitely a nice start to the day. So I'm using a 1/4 ounce lead head jig with a paddle tail body. It's white with a yellow paddle tail. It's actually a lure that I used or picked up when I went to the coast to fish for trout and redfish. But I figured it would work for a striper as well. And there's a fish. So fishing out of a kayak brings a whole nother set of difficulties because now all of a sudden not only are you fighting the fish, but you're also fighting the kayak and trying to navigate and make sure that you're not getting too far away from the rope, all that kind of stuff. It definitely makes for a good challenge. That's a nice little hybrid. So I got tired of floating away from the rope, so I actually lifted the rope up and kind of put it over my pole holder. And so now it's just keeping me right there on the rope. Not too bad. Probably not really safe, but because they're not running a lot of water, I felt pretty good about it. It didn't cause me any issues. But this way I could actually work the fish right up to the boat and not ever float away and then have to paddle back. This one feels like a good fish. Can you hear that drag? I'm just hoping and praying that the line doesn't get caught on one of those buoys up along that rope. So right there, I thought I had broke my line, but it was actually snagged up on that rope somehow. And what I did is I just pulled it free because you're going to see as I reel up the slack, the fish is still there. That's a nice one. I don't have a tape measure, so I can't measure him. I know that he's not 27 inches, though. So just admire and throw him back. Back up on the rope. And there's a fish. So I'm casting out into that current and just letting the current float that jig down. I'm not really jigging it. I'm not reeling it. I'm just letting the current move it. And that seems to be the most effective way to for me at least, to fish this area, is to try to let the current do the job. The fish see that. They just think that it's an injured fish that's coming through the dam, and they'll hammer it. So the temperature when I arrived was probably about mid 40s, but the temperature was definitely rising as the sun kept coming up. What I didn't realize at the time of this trip was that there was a cold front that was moving through later on that evening. Pretty strong thunderstorms that moved through fairly quickly, and then just ushered in some really cold air coming into Monday. Fish on, and this is number 6. So this just goes to show you that if you have your drag set correctly on your rod and reel, even with the bigger fish on a light rod and light line, you should be able to get that fish in if you're patient. So if you're watching this video and you're thinking, well, I don't have a kayak and I don't have a boat, I can't really get out there, just to let you know that what I'm doing will work over there on the South Carolina side, throwing or casting from the dock that's over there. So just take advantage of it and come on out. You never know when they're going to be biting, and as long as you can cast a long ways to get it out there in the current where it's going to drag that fluke or that jig across the bottom, you have a chance of catching one of these stripers. So at this point, it's actually getting close to about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and that sun's starting to warm up. So I'm actually going to take off that little shirt that I had on there to cool off a little bit. But notice I'm going to put my life jacket back on. But this is one of the reasons why I miss my boat. I don't mind fishing out of the kayak when I have to, but getting to the age that I'm at now, it's just more comfortable to be able to fish from a boat and be able to move around and do this kind of thing without having to stretch and grunt and watch this. I wonder if I'm going to catch a fish on the next cast. And there it is. Another nice fish. That's pretty sad. Checking your text messages while you're fighting a fish. I don't suggest that to anybody. Especially when fishing from a kayak. I think I was actually taking a picture of this. John Harper, if you're out there, you're watching this video, this is the point where I took the second picture of the fish and sent it to you. He told me I was showing off. I believe this is my 8th fish, 7th striper so far. And this is all within about a 1 hour period. Earlier in the video, there was a boat that was parked back behind me. You can actually go back and look at it. It's a bigger, nicer boat. And I was kind of watching them cast, and they were in a good spot. I don't think they ever actually caught anything, but I did notice that when they were casting, one of them, it was only going out about, I don't know, maybe 20 yards, not very far. And I just encourage you, make sure when you're coming out, especially if you're doing something like this, when long casts make a difference, you need to have your reels spooled properly and bring that line right up to the edge. That's going to help you make sure you get the longest possible cast. And if you ever get a big fish on, you're going to have plenty of line on there for it to pull. But I'm telling you, those reels, when they're only half full, they're spooled only halfway, they're not going to cast as far. Oh, I was wrong. This is actually the second fish that I sent to John Harper. Ooh, I think this is a big one. So this light action rod, it did pretty well. Even with this particular fish, and I think this is the biggest one I caught of the day, and it might have been 27 inches. You'll see in a moment. But I threw it back. But I will say that if I had actually caught a 30+ inch fish, I really doubt that I could have gotten it in on this particular rod and that little reel. I had to really pump that reel a lot because the ratio for when you're cranking it, the ratio is really low. So I had to really crank it a lot. Whereas my bigger poles, one crank would bring in a lot more line. Well, that's all I've got for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Just a reminder, just make sure, I mean, look, if you got a kayak, you've got a wonderful areas for you to fish around the Augusta area. So take advantage of it. Hey, I enjoyed it. Thanks for stopping by. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, make sure you do that. And remember that if you see me out on the water, be sure to stop and say hello.